Well, here's the actual area. They're already at scenario 5, and they're going to do this again and go to scenario 6 because they have so much water suddenly. That was unexpected. Unless you knew the climate was going to shift and the North African monsoon was going to dump more rain there. Then you wouldn't be a lunatic for putting the largest hydroelectric dam in one of the driest places in Africa, unless you knew the climate was going to change on this same cycle. See, everybody's in on it. That was a World Bank project. How did they know that there would be that much rainfall to fill it in one of the driest areas formerly on the planet? The cycle's inbound, jet streams are changing. They knew more rainfall would come here. Welcome back for the second half right here, Brighty on TV, 2 to 3 p.m. every other Friday. I'm your host, David Dubine, Mini Ice Age Conversations. No food, no civilization. No agriculture, no society, no civilization. Now, prior to the break, I was just trying to set up the understanding that these current flows are well known through many circles, and the onset and the intensity is known. And we're at another juncture right now that hasn't been seen in some 2,000 years. And how would it be dealt with to move and control wealth from one part of the planet to the other? You know, you're going to see a part of the world won't be functional. Another part of the world will be. But it'll be that part that's really not so developed right now. And then you can run another debt cycle through that over the next 80 years. You know, this information is going to come out, at least what I've been told, 2024, at least to some degree, maybe not as I explained it fully there, going back to the Roman era to explain the current flows, but something natural will be included in now. The anthropogenic global warming with the catastrophic ozone depletion event ongoing and runaway, and it is months and months early, and losses already showing deep in the column in the southern hemisphere over Antarctica. They're going to come up with, it's going to be part natural, but still global warming will be going. And again, I talked about tandems. You're going to have a tandem second payment system along with the US dollar. They don't have to go to zero. They just run parallel, but it's still damaging for the dollar. Well, this is going to be the same thing. We're going to have all these natural events, and they're going to run parallel with all the AGW talk, and it's going to be very interlooped for fear control and rationing. I can't say it enough. The planet now has tipped over, and I'm not talking in anything CO2 sense. They are riding on top of the natural cycle, explaining global warming effects of these naturally occurring events from these natural cycles. So everything we're seeing here is natural, but the AGW is they already knew what the effects would be, so they built that into the climate debate, like, oh, this is going to happen. The atmosphere is going to cavitate. You're going to get more rainfall. You're going to get droughts. Oh, of course. If the electromagnetic field changes, our jet streams are going to change also, where they flow to. The cloud cells are going to move in different places. They're going to bunch up on each other in their new flows, and of course they're going to ring out. Rivers from the sky. So here we have one just from yesterday. Strongest only ever recorded tornado in the Colorado Rockies. Now the video is actually on Twitter. It's making the rounds right now, so you can check that. I was mind blown to watch an EF3 tornado scrape across the tops of the Rocky Mountains, blowing snow up. Now go figure, even if you were camping up there and you were skiing, you were backcountry skiing, and you saw that tornado coming at you, you'd be like, that's literally impossible. They've never, ever in the history of Colorado had a high peak tornado. So I wouldn't, see, for me, that wouldn't even register. I would look at it and go, that's literally impossible. They've never, ever had one ever. But then my brain would go, you know what, we're in a time when a lot of never happened stuff is going to start happening and is beginning to happen. Morgan Stanley warns commercial real estate is headed for a crisis worse than 2008. It's no longer a black swan, it's a flock of black swans. There's a banking crisis, commercial real estate, de-dollarization, rate hikes, and persistent inflation. BRICS is the hottest ticket in town, with an additional 19 countries looking to join and move away from the dollar. Mention the Adapt 2030 channel. You're going to get some first-class service. Patriot Gold Group offers the no fee for life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold or silver on qualifying rollovers. 888-546-7020. Call to get your free investor guide today. And now on with the video. You know, down in Texas, they had a hailstone fall down that was 20 pounds, 20 pounds, unheard of. And in India, they had one even bigger. Just a couple of weeks ago, it was something like 20 kilos, almost 40 pounds. I call that cryo something is the name for that. Excuse me, it slips my memory at the moment. So these cavitation and changes are also going to directly result in crop losses and non-ability to grow food, and the planting and harvest dates being out of their own sync. Okay, well, we know that. The food shortages are baked into part of the control system moving forward. They're going to have to pull the economy, allow the food shortages to run their course. At this point, there's not much humanity can do. We squandered 20 years yapping about global warming when we could have spent those 20 years getting everybody on their own home gardens, setting up vast indoor and underground agriculture facilities. Maybe they already have. Where do you think all those trillions of dollars of debt went to? Do you think it was really spent for government running and expenditure? Don't think so. Perhaps those trillions were for the elitists and people they've chosen to build facilities that are outside in different budgets. Just saying. That's a lot of money. And a lot of it's gone disappearing. And even before, before 9/11, they couldn't account for trillions of dollars. So here we are now talking about money. And, you know, the misnomer, or at least what has been fed to us, is the bank run, the bank bail-in. What if it's not a bank bail-in? What's a government bail-in of all the banks? And then it wouldn't really technically be a bank bail-in now, would it? So I was reading a couple articles here. This one's off Bloomberg, and they interviewed a guy, Hugh Hendry, who was talking about the M2 money supply. It's not loans, it's actual physical cash in the wild, for a better term, like all coins, notes, etc. that's out there, even digits on your screen, excuse me, your checking account, etc. The U.S. government, because there's so many bank runs going on and you can digitally transfer things so quickly now, they're considering putting a gate lock on all U.S. assets and funds across anything that the U.S. banking system touches, which means that the U.S. government will allot you a certain amount that you can take out at the ATM. It's not the banks. Banks will be like, what, no, hands off. That's a government policy. You're not culpable. You can't sue the banks. See, you could have before. You know, after the tumultuousness had ended, you could have gone to litigation against the banks for sure. But now the way they rescripted the laws after 2008, you're an uninsured creditor into the bank. Your deposit actually is owned by the bank, and they can choose to pay you back or not. Please read the fine print. You don't actually own your money. So when they do this, they're just going to go, 2008, Dodd-Frank, remember all that? Yeah, you know, there was a rider and a couple of addendums attached to the back of it that said, your money ain't yours. It is ours. And when you deposit in the money, you're giving it to us as an unsecured deposit. Thanks for playing. But anyway, this is going to move up to the national level, because then you know, there won't be any targeting of banks, bank officials like we're seeing across Pakistan and what had happened. It's going to be a Cyprus 2.0, but way deeper, way worse, and way heavier. Now, they're doing the same thing in Nigeria right now, where they're not allowing people access to their funds, and also access to anything SIM card, unless you're on biometrics. They're turning off people's SIM cards across Africa at the moment. So let's talk about M2 money supply. Now, a lot of people are going to the U.S. debt clock, and they're seeing that it shows gold and silver value to a U.S. dollar is zero. Well, it's not that it's not being traded in dollars anymore, although the myth says such a thing. It's just we've gone into negative money supply. So without growing money supply, they can't really tag those two together any longer. But speaking of gold, before we talk about this chart here, there is a possibility. Now, supposedly all the gold that sits in Fort Knox was valued at $42 an ounce on the books in America. They're hitting this debt ceiling coming up at the end of the month. If they were to take all of the gold or part of the gold, the entire valued gold that America holds at $2,000 an ounce is something like $500 billion at today's price versus the actual on-book value of $42 an ounce. That would be a way to raise the debt ceiling, to go past it, for the Treasury to issue and just revalue the gold assets from 42 to 2,000 and then scrape that money. But I don't think they would do that. You know why? That would alert a lot of people that gold has value, and there would be a run on the gold market. Oh man, hold on. You wouldn't be able to get an ounce of gold to save your life. It would be sold out day one after they did that. AppMax, anywhere you go to buy online, JM Bullion, doesn't matter really. Treasure Island Metals, which Mike refers to quite a bit here on Brighteon TV. swooped, they would be gone in seconds. There would be nothing left. So to allow American people to protect their wealth by buying gold and silver pushed by the government, not really sure if that'll manifest, but it's a possibility. Now, back to the chart here. The green boxes are what I pulled right today, just a few hours before the show. The M1 or the M2 money supply compared to the M2 money supply. Get this, far right, March of 2023, it was 20 billion, or it was 20 trillion 818 billion. And then fast forward to today, it's 21 trillion 3 billion. So $815 billion has swept out of the markets wherever it's gone, withdrawn from banks, maybe thrown into money market funds, maybe taken and put in under mattresses, maybe taken and bought gold and silver. Not sure. That's a massive drawdown. That's nearly $1 trillion in less than 2 months. That's why the government's talking to it. Because if this continues for the next 2 months, it'll be another trillion out. And the banks will be defunct by then. I just saw a report. There's 700 banks that are underwater at the moment asking the Fed for help because 50% of their balance is negative because of the interest rates. 700 American banks are under duress. They lost half their value. And if they were to come clean, and this was to happen, I mean, the entire stock market would stop functioning. So you're looking at are they going to allow the money to continue to flow out is the question. And then on the left side there, you're looking at the derivatives off of all the currency and credit right now, $651 trillion. I really don't think that's going to get paid off. But the unwind on that and the bankruptcies that would occur dwarf that. 651 trillion compared to 21 trillion. No comparison there. So if you see why there's a lot of restrictions and talk about stopping short selling, limiting your withdrawals as to stop the complete collapse of the bank system. But wait, I thought the Fed could print money. Now the destabilization against nations and aligned bodies that are moving to gold and silver as well as the BRICS currency is well underway. So again, it's just quirky that I'm showing you all this information about astrological information on cycles that show and validate that we are absolutely at the cusp and have already entered into another one of these cycles. But all these other things playing out at the exact same time, you can't tell me a random happenstance that the entire world's financial system is shifting at the same time we entered another cycle that's going to, reduce population and food supply across the planet. It's been like that time immemorial. And I'm just wondering how many of these cycles have truly the elite rulers gone through versus what the history that we're given in terms of timelines. I'm wondering, stabilized glacial ice sheets would allow vast cultures to arise. Once the Ice Age onset and you understood where that was, you'd be able to put a society out there really quickly. So Texas bill would make gold and silver legal tender in the state. What's happened there with Texas? Seen any problems on the border in Texas? The passage would allow the Federal Reserve's monopoly on money to dwindle to nothing. Then what? Let me get that back up for you. Sorry, I wanted to make sure I was still online. I've been having problems with the computer lately. The gold and silver. Arizona also. Any problems in Arizona? They were moving to gold and silver. Tennessee also. Any problems? You heard Tennessee in the news lately? Moving to gold and silver, just passed the legislation. So you can't tell me that 3 states out of 3 are suddenly experiencing all this societal chaos, and they've all come out and said, we're going to move to gold and silver as legal tender. Wow. Batting 1,000% on that one. Gee, wonder what's going on. Let's list the BRICS and the nations that have applied to the BRICS currency basket here. And this is your list. The latest one that I could find as of today. And they're going to have their next summit on August 23, which will have another whole batch of people or countries that are wanting to apply. These are ones that have so far this year applied to be formal members and actually convert away for settlements away from the dollar. Only using BRICS currency, only using Chinese yuan, only trading oil, gold, minerals, whatever for settlement for the next thing that they need. No more dollar usage out of all these countries. Mexico. What's happening down there? This is going to create an interesting one. If Mexico is going to go with BRICS and they're trying to do this North American currency union with the US dollar, is Mexico going to go parallel? They're going to have 50% settlement in BRICS, 50% settlement in dollar? Not sure. Look at the stabilization efforts down there. But I kind of wanted to focus on Pakistan here for a second. Top right there. And what about Sudan as well? I keep hearing these in the news over and over again. If you're unfamiliar with what's going on in Pakistan or Sudan, here we go. But I can't believe that at least 3 of these nations, actually 4, Syria, Indonesia as well, Turkey, all these nations are starting to have problems that are trying to go away from the dollar. You want to go away from the dollar, my friend? Okay, let's see what happens to your country. It was like that before. Look at what happened with Saddam Hussein. Not that he was a nice guy or anything, but he wanted to start taking euro payments. Look what happened to Gaddafi. He wanted to start a completely gold-backed dinar, gold-backed currency system for all of inter-Africa trading. What happened to him? What happened to Assad in Syria? Same thing, wanted to go away from the dollar. Iran wants to go away from the dollar. Just quirky how all these countries get overthrown when they want to move away from the dollar. Just saying, it's coincidental, isn't it? Pakistan may lose support from the IMF. Now, as far as I know, IMF never lets anybody default on their loans. They just put them in more debt. Then they can strip more resources out of the country. To let a country fail, well, then they would just go to the Bank for International Settlements and go, yo, IMF's not going to cover us. Can we get a loan from the BIS? I have not really seen too many countries go completely down and crash on their debt from an IMF loan, unless it was meant to be to replace leadership. Plain and simple. And as soon as that happened, the new leader will come up and get a new loan from the IMF. So they're looking for $35 or $36 billion immediately to meet obligations on their debt payments, bond interest payments. So for me, I'm going, I'm wondering if this will be allowed to default to then allow cascade with all those derivatives and credit that I showed you with the M2 money supply. Because if this were to cascade, American finance is intertwined in here somewhere pretty heavily because of the involvement in Afghanistan. You know, those twin sister countries right there with the borders, you can't tell me that all those trillions flooded into Afghanistan and nigh a nickel made it over into Pakistan. There's so much money intertwined in that. If it were to be a collapse, that could be a tiny little rug pull that would then lead to larger nations and larger nations. See, they need a full currency collapse to bring in a new system. Now, if you did it in America first and you started here and then just collapsed it on purpose, people go, no, we can still do without the new currency. We can still trade. But if it starts small and then goes through most of the nations that produce food as exports, and then it comes up medium nations, and then we're already at the level of, taken out, that could be it. It could be the step upward. But then Pakistan loses 30 billion due to blackouts in the internet. You want to go to the BRICS, we're going to make you pay. Is the messaging super clear and simple here? Iran, Iraq also signed a new energy pact, which just made the U.S. shudder in their seats and just pound the fists on the table. So they had money that, after the Iraqi invasion, they had all the money, and Iran needs to, try to get some sort of addendum so they can get paid out of that money that's owed for oil leases and oil payments out of Iraq. Then the U.S. government has to approve it, and then it's quote-unquote aid that's allowed to go into Iran for food and this sort of thing. It's not a direct payment for oil. That's illegal. It's an aid payment that's been authorized by the U.S. to go to Iran. Well, you know what? They just kicked Uncle Sam and made him fall down over on the sidewalk over there and said, get out of the way. We're going to go direct. We don't want your involvement anymore. We're going to pay direct to each other. But guess what? We're going to use our own currencies or settle in something else. Ouch. That's a big one. This was, in my opinion, one of the overlooked front page news stories that didn't make it to print. It just shows how vast this OPEC nations are all moving over to the BRICS currencies as well. So that's going to be, oil payments, oil access, all moving to BRICS. Are we going to, as US dollar, we're going to have to use dollars to buy BRICS currency to then buy oil from the new aligned Belt and Road Initiative and Shanghai Cooperation Agreement nations, all OPEC nations? Looks like it. But I'll bring you to Sudan here in the last few minutes. Sudan's a wild one. I like that little circle that they pulled out of there because it shows Khartoum, North Khartoum, where they're fighting. But right in the middle there, we see something called the Blue Nile, the River of Life. So what is going on in Sudan anyway? Well, it's all about food growing areas, access to this dam and the hydroelectric and the water to set up a new growing zone as areas further north, like in Canada, for example, in northern China, go offline. They can set up a new grow zone in Sudan, Eritrea, areas in North Africa. They just need the water and electricity. Now, this dam was supposed to take 7 years to fill. It filled in 2 years. It's called the New Renaissance Dam. Now, this thing is massive. It's the largest hydroelectric dam in Africa. So the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, right at the border there, it's only 40 miles to get down to lines to take it to Khartoum. Now, that's, again, you got electricity and food growing, you're sitting pretty. And then Ethiopia to supply South Sudan with electricity. Gee, where's the fighting started? And why is the Nile River so important? Well, here's the actual area. They're already at scenario 5, and they're going to do this again and go to scenario 6 because they have so much water suddenly. That was unexpected. Unless you knew the climate was going to shift and the North African monsoon was going to dump more rain there. Then you wouldn't be a lunatic for putting the largest hydroelectric dam in one of the driest places in Africa, unless you knew the climate was going to change on this same cycle. See, everybody's in on it. That was a World Bank project. How did they know that there would be that much rainfall to fill it in one of the driest areas formerly on the planet? The cycle's inbound, jet streams are changing. They knew more rainfall would come here. False topographic color here, so you can see the water in blue quite easily. That's going to continue to fill. And look at all the new dams. Those black circles, those are new dams that are coming out. Thousands, tens of thousands of megawatts will come out of this whole area eventually. And the irrigation coming off of several of these systems. Oh, I forgot there's oil in Sudan too. Who would want that oil? And who would want Port Sudan along the Red Sea because they could control the next step right after they exit the Suez Canal. I wonder who wants the oil, the electricity, the crops, and access to the Red Sea ports. Who do you think? Now, Aden Port, way down at the corner there in Yemen, is the last treasure, the cherry on the top there. So you can see how much ship traffic comes through the Suez Canal, obviously, and then the green up in the corner there is all the oil shipment routes. Sudan Cliff Notes, U.S. ambassador comes back after 25 years, tells them you can't side with the Chinese, and U.S. evacuates, months later after destabilization campaign. Look at that, 288 million sent in. You know we're at the change of an age. Everybody does. Just the person on the street doesn't. Thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of this. Now the dots really do connect a little more cleanly. See you next time. Bye for now.